Batu, Barada, Nikto. You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by my prehistoric partner, Julian Darius. Julian, you okay?
I was just thawed from an iceberg, so
Mm.
I'm feeling good. How about you?
Yeah, it's good to be back in the land of Kong and Godzilla, the Titan universe, but not the legendary one, not the modern one. We don't do that kind of thing. We go back to the original, and we're actually going to be talking about the 1962 slash 63 sequel to the original Godzilla, King Kong versus Godzilla, directed by Ishiro Honda and Tom Montgomery. For those that have been watching the American version, which I think, as we've sort of said, both you and I saw the American version. In this, let's just quickly, a UN reporter covers the appearance of a prehistoric monster that emerges from hibernation while a pharmaceutical company seeks publicity with a monster of their own, eventually leading to a confrontation between King Kong and Godzilla. That's the synopsis for the American version. If we do just sort of do it for the Japanese version, it's the advertising director of a pharmaceutical company seeks to boost ratings for their sponsored TV program by capturing the legendary monster King Kong, just as Godzilla re-emerges. So that's really the crux of it, to be honest. It's a capitalist. This film's all about promotional material for a TV channel by a pharmaceutical company. Those crazy
Why
60s.
not?
Yeah, those crazy 60s. Anyways, what's your initial thoughts then on King Kong versus Godzilla?
Well, I mean, this is some pretty silly stuff. I think we were saying,
Yeah.
you know, um, I think one of the things I'm most fascinated by, I've always been interested by this, and I've never watched it before, just because it was this weird version of King Kong,
Mhm.
and obviously King Kong was still, in the popular consciousness at this point. It was big enough that, I mean, Toho paid quite a bit of money to license it. Um, but then, the other thing I find interesting is that obviously Honda's the director of the first Godzilla, which we
Yep.
quite liked, and we both thought Raids Again was terrible, and now it's 7 years later. Godzilla was dead. It wasn't a franchise. It was just a movie that was popular enough to get a quick sequel.
Mm-hmm.
And, 7 years later, they licensed King Kong. King Kong is the headliner.
Yes.
And this movie just does bonkers box office in Japan and launches the Godzilla franchise. I mean,
Yeah.
and there's no sign of any of the sophistication of the original one, despite having the same director. We're really sort of in the just guys in foam suits fighting each other sort of era.
Yeah, 100%. Like, yeah, where I think what's fascinating is where some of these franchises start, and then when they end up, is kind of ridiculous. I mean, this is kind of like the Fast and the Furious sort of like level of change in a franchise. That first film is a horror. It's about sort of like social sort of response to this cataclysmic event that happened and how they deal with it, and it has some really dark elements, but it has the monster cool. This one is akin to a Power Rangers episode. It's like you say, it's guys in suits fighting each other. However, I mean, I like this much more than Raids Again. mainly because it's in color and everything, but also it kind of like it embraces the camp in the right way. That there's a wink, there's a sort of a twinkle in the eye of this of the making of this, and even more so with the American editions, where
Mhm.
it's kind of like the campiness and the weirdness of it. Sort of, it's just enjoyable in a kind of, it's just an oddity. It's just a real oddity, but it works for me at least.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. It definitely knows that it's a little campy, right? I mean, it does have that kind of wink
Yeah.
at the viewer. Um, yeah, I mean, there are things I like. I mean, I like King Kong. I always like sort of like the natives and their legends
We'll
of
get
King
to
Kong.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, but look, as racist as all that stuff is, at least it's entertaining and fascinating and has that kind of swashbuckling adventure kind of feel to it. Although it's all sort of abridged here.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess I still miss the sense of something deeper from that first film, right? Of having
Hmm.
themes, of having, a sense of the um deaths and a real sense of stakes. This is really in at this point, well, it's really true in Raids Again, right? Like all that stuff just disappears and you know, I mean, it's amazing how quickly franchises kind of like not necessarily devolve, but kind of strip out any of the original depth and, right away go to, right, you like people driving fast cars, right?
Yes.
Um, yeah. But I mean, like, this isn't without its charms.
Oh no, this has got some charm. Is what this has in abundance. I think that's, it's not got depth in any
Yeah.
way, but it has charm. Yeah. Um.
I kind of like the giant octopus.
Yes. Well, I think one of the things that's interesting about this is how it came about. I think this is one of the things that's interesting. Um. And I had a little look. I think it might be a bit more on Wikipedia or some other areas, but this didn't start out as um got King Kong versus Godzilla. It started out as a
Mhm.
sort of, I'm not even sure one of them was going to be in it, either King Kong or Godzilla, and the other one was going to be Frankenstein's monster.
It was King Kong,
It was
right? I
King
mean, so
Kong.
no,
Yeah,
this was a King Kong movie
yeah,
that then they got rid of. I mean, Frankenstein's monster, they were worried that was owned by Universal. They wanted to swap that out for someone new. And then Toho's like, yeah, let's bring back that Godzilla guy who,
mm,
hasn't been around for 7 years.
yeah. But I love the fact that like clearly a part of that survives. I mean, in this version, inexplicably for no apparent reason, King Kong gets souped up powers from electricity. Like it makes no. At the end of this film, he's literally chewing on electricity wires to get power, and I am thinking like, oh, that was in the script, and that was Frankenstein's
Mm.
monster that was doing that.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
So they've
Yeah,
taken
I mean,
elements and then just brought them in and gone like that remains because we haven't really got another answer. But that's kind of funny.
yeah, that's funny. I hadn't thought about that. Um, Yeah, I mean, I sort of took it as just like, right, how do they know this? Like the Japanese know
Yeah.
know this before it's ever shown. Um, and at one point, I mean, Godzilla beats King Kong, and King
Mm.
Kong gets hit by, a series of lightning bolts that
Yeah.
sort of charge him back up. And I don't know, it reminds me of all these sort of like, kaiju movies and, sort of movies with mechs and stuff where, everybody's got sort of like a superpower or like, they've got their character card,
Yeah.
and it's like, you know, this one gets charged up by electricity, and there's no explanation or reason
No.
for that, but
It makes no sense. But yeah, you're right. I like that. Like, there's a character card. Like like Godzilla's got fire breath, and Kong's got electrical powers. So
it's like they're
overall,
video game characters,
yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, and this. I mean, the fighting at the end of this is very much like button mashing kind of fighting. Like, there's no choreography to any of well, barely any of the fighting in this. Um, but it is kind of fun. I
although
do.
some of it is really enjoyable.
Oh yeah,
I have
yeah,
to
yeah.
say there are moments. Sometimes I've seen Godzilla movies, on TV and thought this just does not look good. This is just, and there are moments like that here. But then there are moments of sort of like almost pro wrestling, sort of
Yes,
like chaos and weirdness that it's sort of like, oh wow, I can kind of relate to that.
I think it benefits that it's that Kong being an ape has, um, you know, not so much human proportions, but you can do certain things that like you can't do as like Rodan or King Ghidorah sort of thing. There's kind of limitations on what they can do from a fight, but with like Kong, you can have a fight, like you could do something like, but there is. I know we're jumping around a little bit, but there's a fight later on where Godzilla uses his breath, like his atomic breath on Kong. Kong just gets pissed off and just charges at him and basically just leathers him to the floor. And I was just like, that's amazing. That's brilliant. I wonder what it was like to have that when you're sat inside like a latex suit. Like just all of a sudden this thing just like lamps at you and you go off, you go flying. So no, there is real fun in this film at times, which it's just it is that sort of chuckle-some kind of fun. Um I want to go back though to this whole thing, right? Because there are sort of like let's the two versions of this. We both watched the
Mm.
American version, right? But it's not hard to determine the Japanese story from the American inserts. Um, and the inserts are this UN reporter, um, played by Michael Keith, playing Eric Carter, who basically just is there to sort of point out things in the story and introduce it. And so the first element is him saying sort of like it's kind of like a bit of a lead in, and he talks about the berries which get fermented into this thing, and this company's going to introduce them and that sort of thing. And then it sort of passes it into the story, and I'm never entirely sure like how meta this thing is supposed to be, because in parts like they have news footage and they have interviews and they have all this other stuff, and in other parts they just sort of click across to the story and the story's just sort of taking place, and I'm like, I don't know whether this narration is supposed to be like how, you sort of like how do they know half the stuff that's going on because it's either happening on an island or out at sea or whatever. It's very silly, but it kind of
Yeah,
knows that it's silly, which I really do appreciate.
that's true. And there are other things like this, like there's talk about using a nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, and this movie also and evacuating Tokyo. At one point, a Japanese character references we'd have to evacuate Tokyo, if not Japan. It's like I mean, but they know exactly where everyone is moving at all times,
Yeah.
and I mean, they're able to prepare quite elaborate, like at one point there's like a Hoover Dam level like construction project that just happens in a day. Um, and so it is a little silly, but I often find myself wondering right away from the UN thing, like this sort of occurs in a very separate, like a very different universe than those first two films. Um,
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
so like that first film is just a very hard-edged, realistic film, and the second one is like it's still in the same world. It's just there's another, monster, and we're
Yeah.
going to focus on that. This one has those monsters, but you have the UN, which is obviously active and has its own press agency. There's
Mhm.
a space station that's
Yeah.
involved. The Japanese have nuclear weapons and a military that's way more than their self-defense forces were
Hmm.
in the 60s. So this clearly sort of like occurs in an alternate timeline from
The first one.
reality. Well, but also from, it
Our
diverges from
reality.
history.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's the point. But that's just, I was going to go a slightly different way, but that's a really good point actually. This is a sort of, and also because this is kind of like the I don't know much about sort of Japanese 50s and 60s cinema other than you know you and I have watched, sort of like Kurosawa and a couple of other things. This has got like a very sort of positive kind of almost, there's a comedic bent to it as well. Like it's got a real sort of comedy through line, and it's a weirdly positive film from the human side of things. It's about capitalism. This is about a pharmaceutical company willing to spend money to capture a monster so that they can do promotional stuff on a TV channel. Like, it's weird, but like, I don't know, it feels kind of industrious in a sort of 60s way, doesn't it? Like, they go off to an island and they're kind of like, there's the main guy and his kind of sort of cowardly and silly sidekick, and it's all very typical. But yeah, I don't know, it feels like you said, it's much more optimistic. Which is cool. I want to see that in the sort of from 60s entertainment. But the point I wanted to make is the 60s version, sorry, the Japanese version is a direct sequel to Raids Again.
Yes.
In that, at the end of Raids Again, Godzilla is trapped on an iceberg, and they shoot at the iceberg, and it collapses around him, and he gets trapped in the ice. And then he is released from that iceberg in this film due to a ship or submarine sort of colliding with it and stuff. So Godzilla is released from that iceberg that he was trapped in 7 years ago or whatever. So from the Japanese perspective, you said it's a different world, different element of history. This is a continuation of that story. It literally picks up from Raids Again in that sense. In the American version, it has that, but there is no acknowledgement of the first two films. They have a character called Dr. Johnson who comes on, and he's like, this thing's been hibernating in this iceberg for millions of years. And they're kind of like, this is
Right.
a completely different thing. And they're like, I'm going, but how do they all know it's Godzilla? Like, they literally, all the
Yes.
Japanese characters are referring to this as Godzilla, and he's coming to Japan. And they try to cover that by saying, oh, he's got a homing signal, and that must be where he's from. And there are fossilized bones that look like Godzilla from this part of the world. And I was kind of like, oh, so you're going to completely ignore the first two films, but they were released at least in
Yeah.
part in the States. So there's an acknowledgement that they're aware of them. So it felt like a really weird choice not to just say, oh, this is Godzilla and he has escaped from the iceberg and off we go.
Yeah, continuity is very, very loose there.
Yeah.
I mean, but even in the Japanese version of this, I mean, you're right that the American one is like, well, how do you know that's Godzilla?
Yeah.
I mean, it's very abrupt and sort of unconvincingly done. Um, and doesn't really make sense. But even in the Japanese version, I mean, it's confusing. Like, okay, so he's still in the iceberg, right? But in the interim, this sort of like hopeful 60s period has dawned, and there's the space station, and there's like the Japanese military is clearly at a very different level than they were, not only 7 years ago, but also in reality.
Mm.
So I mean, it's almost like we've veered in those intervening 7 years into a sort of like science fiction universe in which, like, this is much more kind of like jingoistic, in the sense of like Japan is really strong and really industrious, um and in the Japanese version, do they reference nuclear bombs?
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so the Japanese have a nuclear bomb in
Yeah.
the Japanese version too. I
Yeah.
find this mind-boggling. Like, I mean, imagine being watching this in Japan in the 60s, and you think, well, we don't have a nuclear bomb. We barely have a self-defense force, let alone fleets of
Mm.
tanks. There's no space station like depicted in the movie. This is science fiction, right? We're in the future, or at least an alternate reality, but it's an alternate reality that is, obviously in some sense a more hopeful one, but it's one with a much more stronger, more militaristic Japan than reality.
Yes.
Which is strange because, part of the Japanese myth is sort of like, well, Japan was always a peaceful country, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even if you know your history, that was all, American Reconstruction imposed. why what does a Japanese person in the 60s think watching a movie that seems to be set in the present day but has a space station and has Japan has a nuclear bomb? Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
isn't this
yeah.
weird?
No, it is. And I'm just looking to see who the writers were. Um, and it does feel like you say it's there you go. Um, I mean, wow. Okay, so the guy that wrote this, um, Shinji Sekizawa, wrote this. He's credited for both. Goes on to do Mothra versus Godzilla, Godzilla versus Biollante, Godzilla 1985, Return of Godzilla. He does a lot of Godzilla. Um, All Monsters Attack. It kind of feels like that doing it in that way, because if you do look at some of the we'll eventually maybe get through some of the classic Godzillas as well as we go through them. Whenever you watch them, they're kind of the Japan that's presented is often kind of optimistic and kind of sort of prosperous and that sort of thing, because Godzilla, all the monster he is fighting is the threat. So I do wonder if this sort of, if Sekizawa is that's kind of his thing, was just kind of like, yeah, I just want to write these characters and they're fun. And then, you know, also I do kind of wonder if there's a nod to we've got to sell this abroad. So we've got to have these sort of like, if Godzilla's there, we can't all just be cowering. We've got to be shown to be, fighting back with tanks and things or missiles. So it kind of almost feels like necessary for the story that's being told.
Yeah, maybe it's a little strange, and maybe this is like an American bias, right?
Hmm.
Like, if I'm watching a movie and it has, like, let's say it's got like a secret American agency that's got anti-gravity weapons or something, right?
Yeah,
That's obviously science fiction. We know that technology doesn't exist, but it doesn't feel so, I mean, it's a step to the left of the truth, right? I
yeah,
mean, we've got a big military, we've got spy agencies, and bases around the world, and it just seems like a little step to the left. It would be a little weird to say, like, watch an Iranian movie in which, like, Iran has a space station and nuclear bombs and has, like, um
yeah.
a space force, and this, like, anti-gravity. You'd think, like, this is strange. Does this represent some kind of, like, insecurity on the part of that country or something? um
I think
but
that
then I
might be
think of,
part
like,
that could be part of it.
yeah,
I mean,
but then I think of, like, all the, like, Robotech, and I mean, Macross, and uh all of the Japanese anime,
mm,
Gundam and all this stuff. I mean, all of those present a sort of, like, future or near future in which Japan has that kind of, advanced technology and is a world leader,
yeah,
including in military technologies, um, which I never bat an eye to. But there's something about it being in the 60s, that feels,
a bit out of place.
yeah, I mean, it's so weird even the nuclear bomb thing. Like,
Which
very few
feels,
countries have a nuclear bomb even today, but
yeah.
especially in the 60s.
But even
Um,
then, but even considering that the original Godzilla is that kind of is a commentary on the dropping of the nuclear weapons, to then be saying like less than 10 years later to be like, yeah, we're going to drop one ourselves
on
to take
Tokyo,
on Tokyo to
they
take out
got
Godzilla.
like, yeah, I mean, okay, so they don't mention, like, that's going to kill the emperor,
Yeah,
or if we don't evacuate him. But no, I know, I thought about that too, right? Like, if you thought Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bad, the Japanese are ready to drop one on Tokyo.
yeah.
Um, we wouldn't even have done do that. We ruled that out, for God's sake. Right, but they're quite happy to contemplate
Mm.
that. So all nuclear fears are just gone now, right?
Yeah, just we're now everything's on the table at this point in order to combat Godzilla and King Kong.
Yeah, the bomb
Uh,
is just another cool thing, another
yes,
technological tool by installment three.
yeah, yeah. Isn't this awesome? Yeah, it does feel kind of weird, but I do wonder if, and I don't know because I mean, this got funding obviously from, you know, well, in order for it to be sold to America, there must have been a funding thing. So I do wonder if there was a nod to that or an eye to that. That's okay. This has got to go to an American audience because that's going to help us sell this. We've got to keep that in mind. And you and I have sort of, touched on this in other things we've talked about how, after the Second World War, with the occupation of Japan, and a lot of their cinema then was kind of put through a filter of American censors over there.
Mhm.
So by this point, they'd be quite used to this idea of going, okay, what's the American eye? What's the American thought process on this? And I wonder how much of that has gone on with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? I mean, that's the sort of lasting legacy of, that occupation and that
Hmm.
influence of American culture and
Yeah.
American censorship. Um, yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, and that might, there's a book to be written there about sort of like how Japanese culture was able to sort of, be so successful later in America. I mean, even this and,
Hmm.
Godzilla was successful in America in part because it had that infusion of, American culture from that occupation,
Yeah.
um, which, obviously, other cultures didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. But it does present sort of certain things. I want to talk about sort of cultures, and I was kind of confused. I was struck by something. I was watching this with my 11-year-old daughter, and she thought it was funny, and it was obviously dubbed, and she was kind of doing a. In all honesty, she was doing her homework at the same time, but she was sort of watching this, and sort of her head would pop up, and she'd be like, "What is going on? Why are they doing this? What's going on?" She loved the miniatures, and I got to say, I love that. I also adore some of the miniature sets in this are brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Like they're clearly miniatures, but even
Hmm.
the attention to detail and the way they're used was fantastic. So applaud that. Sets were great. When they get to the island, though, because the setup is there's this island. They want to bring Kong. I forget, is it like it's not called the Faroe Islands because that's not a
Yeah.
real island. Is
No,
this what
it
it's called?
really is. It's Faro. It's just
Fair.
Faro
Oh, okay.
Island, as opposed to the real Faro Islands
Yeah,
closer to you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so they go there, and there's this little team of that's basically this pharmaceutical company led by these two guys. They get to this island, and it's all sort of slightly comedic, and they meet the natives of this island. Now, I have dealt with um actors doing blackface in films from different eras. Um, everyone from sort of like Spike Milligan and some of the Carry On films to people doing blackface, and also let's not be clear, even the original King Kong, which when we get to it we'll talk about. However, and this just I think this is my racial bias. I'm really putting this out there. It felt more obvious to me when I
Mhm.
saw a lot of Japanese
Definitely.
people in blackface doing um accents and sort of tribal dancing and things. And this is where Ellie, my daughter, sort of looked up and very confused, sort of looked at me, sort of like she literally explained this. And I was like,
That's what she said.
yeah, like she was literally like, I don't know what's happening. I was like, they've gone to an island. These Japanese actors are wearing blackface and they're pretending to be these natives. And she sort of looked at me, she was like, okay, and just sort of did that, carried on the homework. But yeah, it needed explanation because it's so. And it's not just that, they have like another sort of other little mini native that's there for comedic effect, as that's the translator between the
Hmm.
Japanese guys and the natives. Yeah, I don't know. It's of its time. I know it's the 60s, but it just felt weirder because it's sort of maybe this is my own racist and this is my own racial bias because I'm kind of like going, oh, I'm used to seeing ethnically white people
White
playing
people in
playing African.
blackface.
Yeah, like which is
Yeah.
not it's not that it's more acceptable. I'm not saying that. It felt weirder.
It definitely feels weird, and
Yeah,
it doesn't feel as effective as some of the King Kong
yeah,
films do with exploring the natives and encountering a different culture and stuff like that. That's clearly here, but it's a very stripped down version of it. And as you say, there's a comic character who,
Hmm.
not much is done with any of this. Except they get King Kong, I mean,
Yeah.
and I did really like this sequence, but I mean, I had the same observation. I found it a little like I found it weirder, but also in a sense like less weird, less like sometimes you see a white actor in blackface and you're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that's cringe. That's really
Yeah.
painful." I mean, it does maybe it's weirder. It does sort of feel more distant and more
Hmm.
socially acceptable to me, where it's like, "Oh yeah, this is something that everybody did. This is something the Japanese did,
Hmm.
I mean, maybe it's that little part of me that says, this is not my country's sin alone.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a little bit of that. Like, yeah, we're not alone. Oh, others did it too. Okay, we're all terrible for doing this. Um, yeah.
Well, I mean,
But
to me, it's maybe a little more forgivable because it's like, I mean, there's not a lot of actors available.
no,
We've
no, no,
seen Japanese movies where, you know, it's shocking that they have a few white guys
no.
and you're
Mm.
like, where did they get these people from?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I don't know. I mean, you can find black people to play,
Hmm.
I mean, this is all uncomfortable, right? Like,
Yeah, oh,
good
yeah.
luck, black actor in Hollywood in the 1960s. You're going to play
Yeah.
native number five for the rest of your
Yes.
career. But at
Yeah.
least you could find that actor. In Japan, it's kind of like more forgivable,
It's a
in a
much
way.
more
I don't know.
difficult. Yeah, it's a much more difficult sort of casting couch. That one. Yeah. It's fun.
I
Like
wasn't even thinking of the.
yeah. um, but one of the things I find interesting is, I mean, they put. I'm not going to sort of downplay it. They put effort into it. Like the choreography for the dancing and the singing is actually kind of cool. Like it is actually pretty cool. What I was more interested in is this concept of basically they worship Kong. That's standard, right? We know that you get these people get to the island, the natives worship Kong as some sort of god. Fine. They usually end up sacrificing a member of the tribe to Kong, right? What he does to them, we don't know. You know, the suggestions of some of the later film or some of the films is, leaning more into sort of sexual assault rather than eating them. But in this one, he
And
turns
that's
up.
that's clear all through, and that's clear in
Yeah.
this one too. I mean, Kong likes the ladies.
Oh,
That's
he
one of his
does.
character card defining traits.
Yes, and that comes up later on. But in this point, not only does he like the ladies, he likes a drink too. Kong loves a
Uh-huh.
tipple. He turns up, and all he's interested in is these fermented berries. And basically gets shit faced pretty quick and passes out. Like he is the ape at a party. He just turns up, drinks a bit, like drinks as quickly as possible, falls asleep.
Yeah, he more clearly represents that sort of like male sort of macho dumb ape kind of
Mm-hmm.
energy. He likes to drink his sake
Yeah,
and he likes to sexually assault women. Other than that, he likes electricity,
yeah,
and destroying things. He's not really looking for a fight, but he's willing to have one if you push him.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
Running for Supreme Court judge at some point. I think he's in with the shot.
Yeah. He
Uh,
really likes his beer. That's his
yeah,
major qualification.
but no,
What
but no, go
what's
on.
interesting about these berries is that you're told in narration that like these berries are basically like I don't know. I dig the King Kong stuff in this, but
Hmm.
the berries are sort of like a magic Smurf like elixir that I don't know why King Kong likes it, and it makes him sort of like pass out in addition to the singing, right? I mean, this is sort of like a song that makes him slumber, as we see later. I agree with you. The choreography is cool. It's good to
Yeah,
see
yeah,
this dancing, and um, it seems sort of vaguely Polynesian or something. But yeah, the berries like are responsible for these mutations for this like giant, you know.
yes,
Uh, so does King Kong, is that why King Kong exists? Is because he was, at some point an ape who get the berries,
Or is it a
or,
generational thing
I
that
don't, I don't know how
sustain
this shit works.
sustain them at the because again like
I
because
don't,
you
I don't think they know.
no oh no they don't and I don't think I like the fact there's a pharmaceutical company that wants the berries though because they're like oh they've got this thing. I mean this is like gummy berry juice from the gummy bears if you ever watched that show as a kid. um yeah, these are like a magic berries, aren't they? Like, oh, this pharmaceutical wants the what they do. Kong's is interested in getting liquored up. Um, but I like the fact that it doesn't go straight to that. The first thing is that like it's not just Kong that lives on Faroe Island. Um, there is this octopus, and so you get this attack by this octopus, which is a real octopus on a mini set with superimposed actors and stuff like that. And then they have a fake one at one point when Kong fights it, and which is just a guy fighting a rubber tentacled octopus. But it's fine. But again, having that real octopus sort of like slurping its way over those mini sets and stuff, and then it cuts inside one of the sets as if there's a family there, and the thing's all shaking and that. It's all really good. I'm not gonna lie. I was laughing away and I'm giggling away at this in a way of like, this is really fun. Like it's silly, but it's really good fun.
I did like the octopus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, very Japanese choice. Yeah,
Yeah.
for an animal.
Yeah.
Um, apparently there were like five octopi that were used in this, and they set them free at the end, except for one that the director ate.
I thought this was
Um,
going to go like Shrinking Man, where they were like there were 40 of these things and they were all killed. Like, no, okay,
yeah,
that's good. That's good.
the tarantulas that
Yeah.
filled the whole boxes. Yeah, now, but the octo, you're right. The octopus stuff is fun, and
Yeah, it's really
it
good.
gives Kong something to do, someone to fight before he gets drunk and passes out.
Yeah. When we get to our Kong retrospective at the end of the season, we're going to go through. Yeah, because we're doing Kong Skull Island, aren't we? Much to
Yeah,
your,
yeah, yeah.
I know you're not a huge fan, but we'll get to. But there's a. I didn't realize there's a reference to this in that with the octopus bit. So I was kind of curious. I was like, oh man, that's got to be a reference to this. So that'd be interesting to get to. Um, but it also, what this does is it obviously you get the attack, which is kind of cool and it's good fun. And then when Kong beats it, it sets up Kong as being kind of badass. So
Yeah,
it
good
does allow
point.
them to establish Kong as being dominant, and he is able to fight, and he can sort of defeat this octopus, this giant octopus. So I'm glad they have it there just for that purpose as well, really.
Yeah. That makes sense in terms of the narrative, right? Especially if this is a continuation of the other Godzillas, unlike the American version. So you've sort of already seen Godzilla as a threat. Let's see Kong as a threat. Um, it's worth mentioning like this. I do like the dancing, and there's some superimpositioning stuff that, is fun. But I wonder about this. It comes back later. This like it seems like a very Japanese idea about like music and the role
Mm.
of music in to soothe monsters or control them or in plots. Um, More generally. And I mean, it's there obviously, like, Mothra has those women who
The
sort of,
two twins, yeah, yeah.
yeah. And so I mean, this does seem a kind of like Japanese trope of like, the power of this drumming and this music sort of like soothes Kong, you know, is somehow, able to influence him.
But I like that. I thought it was really, yeah, it's an interesting one because it kind of gives it's a plot device. I mean, it comes up for, like you say, it comes up for a point later on. But I kind of like that this sort of the islands have come up with this as well. That it's is it part of their worship of Kong, or is it like he's out cold, he likes to hear the music, and it's kind of part of his bedtime routine. I don't know.
It's like a lullaby
It
for
is,
yeah.
yeah. So I like this idea that like music soothes the savage beast kind of idea. Um,
But
and when it
unique to this, right? I mean, that's not in the original Kong films.
no,
Yeah.
no, but I like it when it's used later on when he climbs, and not even a tall building, like a small to medium sized building later on. He captures one of the characters' sisters, and he's like, "I have an idea. We can do this." And Kong's not even had a drink, but you're right, the rhythmic drumming, and they play the chanting or the melody, or whatever, over the speakers. It sort of lulls him to sleep. Um, no, I thought that was good. I thought that's kind of
It's unique.
it is.
Yeah,
It's
if
good.
nothing
I think
else.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think it works. It it leads. One of the things I love about this film is we've talked about sort of screenwriting before. One of the things that this film does is it constantly tries to set things. It constantly sets things up that it wants to use later on, especially for Kong, because I think Godzilla's kind of already been set up. So it'll talk about the electricity at some point, and it'll set these things up. One of the things it sets up in this film, just to sort of go to this point when Kong goes to sleep, is one of the characters in this goes to his apartment, sees his sister, everything, and then his friend's like, I've got this wire. It's this indestructible wire. It's super strong. And then basically sort of like balances off the balcony of their apartment to show how strong it is. And you go, that's a really weird thing to have in this film. Like, why have you introduced this wire that's so incredibly strong? Oh, that's right. You want to tie it to helium balloons and King Kong, and then use it to
Mm,
float him to Godzilla. I was just like, oh wow! Like I'd have just accepted rope. Like there's no need for
yeah.
this element. I'd have accepted rope, but you've introduced something. Fair enough. Well done. Yeah. So just like the use of the dancing, they have to have a scene. It's like we've introduced this wire. We want to do it for this scene. Cool. All
And
right.
and that scene is pretty well done with him,
Mm.
hanging off the balcony like that.
Yeah.
But as you say, like it's really kind of unnecessary, and it
Yes.
sort of is there to justify a like this phenomenally silly thing that you don't really like. you know, Kong could just as much just
Mm.
leave the Tokyo area. It's not really important that they float him away. He just, wakes up and destroys the balloons and gets out. Um, so, none of this winds up being, it's like these little twists to the plot just to
Yeah.
to have something else that happens. And it's the same thing's true with putting Kong to sleep, right? Like you
Hmm.
don't really need that. I mean, you could easily rewrite this so he just leaves, right?
Mm.
Um, but they set these things up, but they set them up for a payoff for like another random chapter in the story, right? Um,
Yeah, it's just like a little vignette of like, we're going to do this. I have this idea of Kong tied up with helium balloons. How do we get there? Oh, we've got to have this, we've got to have that. Like, they're not going to explain the massive balloons, but they're going to explain the string that holds that holds them together. Fair
that's
enough.
a good point, right?
Yeah. Um, but again, this
Same
all
way,
comes.
same way they're able to replicate that song perfectly.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's not
He's heard
something
it
that those
once.
tribal people have perfected over generations. White people can just hear that, well, or Japanese people can just hear that and perfect it instantly,
Yeah.
and use technology to make it on the spot.
Yes, I thought that too. Like he's heard this song once, and then out of just one drum, he's able to replicate everything about it. Like it is very silly, but again, I don't know. There's kind of like just a charm to this film that like it's almost like watching it reminded me, when you go to see sort of like an amateur production of something, everyone's very sort of passionate about it, and it's sort of it's kind of like it's not great, but you're like, oh, I really respect everyone that's done on this. It's got a kind of a charm and a kind of like it's held together by sort of like sticky tape and bubble gum, but kind of like that's part of its charm.
Yeah.
Like in particular, like as the fighting started, again, Ellie sort of just popped her head up, and her response basically was like, King Kong looks crap. I prefer Godzilla. Like that was her sort of, that was just I was like she was like the Godzilla suit looks good. Not great, but she was like, oh, the Godzilla suit's pretty cool, but like
Yeah.
the King Kong suit does kind of look a little bit ratty and a little bit ragtag.
Yeah, I
Like
agree. I mean, some of the close-ups are better. I mean, they still look like a suit, but
Yeah.
I mean, at least um the close-ups whenever they pull out and you sort of see King Kong's kind of shoulders and whole body, yeah, it does look pretty ratty. And
Yeah.
this was something that, the original King Kong, people were concerned about. They didn't want King Kong to ever be done except in stop motion, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so they did not want the Japanese to, make a guy in a suit, because they would worry, it would look shit. And it does.
It
Yeah,
does. Yeah.
I think especially when you see him just standing around from sort of a distance, it's best in close up, right?
Yes, it is.
Um,
Agreed.
yeah, when you see the whole body standing there, it really is evident that's just a guy standing there.
Yeah, with extendable arms. That.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to be fair, at least they have bits that move. Like its eyes move, or it blinks to a degree. And um, does other bits, but it's just kind of like it looks like a guy in a suit. Um, it's but part of it's the face. I have to admit, you say with the close up, some of the close ups are fine,
Yeah.
but it is the face. I'm like, is this supposed to be like this? Is doesn't look much like a gorilla. I get that it's an ape. Like I'm fine, I get it, but
I think
um,
part of my problem is, I mean, I think where the head mask connects to the body is really visible. And that's kind of one of my problems there.
yes,
Um, the other is that whoever the actor is who's playing King Kong needs to be like bending forward and sort of like assuming a more gorilla-like stance.
yeah,
Uh, and instead he's just standing around like he's in a suit, And
just
and
chill.
at one point when Godzilla has hit him with a flame breath and King Kong basically just is like, I'm out and
It
walks
walks
away.
off. Yeah,
They sort of show him sort of singed a little bit, and then he
yeah,
just turns around and walks away, and
yeah,
it's just, oh, that's a human being standing upright in a suit, turning around and walking away.
yeah.
He needs to have some of the gait of
Yes.
a gorilla.
And I think this is one of those things that I mean, there's other bits and pieces. Like he picks up a rock at some point, like a boulder, and he throws it. This has always been a problem with these films. Is he throws a boulder at Godzilla, and you can sort of the way it bounces off Godzilla, like, well, that's made of like
Styrofoam.
polystyrene, yeah,
Yeah.
which is always a thing. But the thing you say about having the gait and the sort of the movements and all this stuff, and I know this is the '60s and it's low budget and that's not really what they're thinking, but we will get that later on. I mean, again, we will see that with some of the when we do some of the Kong films. But all I think that really comes into play much more so with um, um, Andy Serkis when he does the Planet of the Apes movies. When he really was like, "Oh, we're going to do a CGI
The
ape."
motion
Okay,
capture.
the mocap. Like, oh, okay, I've got to learn to do this and that sort of thing. And they really sort of lean into that. But the other one I would say is, if you've ever seen Congo, based on the Michael Crichton book,
No.
it's about a gorilla that can do sign language and has this obsession with going back to this area where it's sort of like it was captured when it was little. And when they go there, there's all these sort of other apes, and there's a diamond mine and stuff. And it's I mean, it's not a terrible film. It's a B movie kind of thing. Ernie Hudson's in it, and but the gorillas are all done with people in suits, and they do exactly as you say. It's all about they all went on training about how to sort of move in a certain way, and it kind of looks for all of its issues, it's got some good effects in it, and so it's not that it's
Yeah.
impossible to do. It's
No,
just
I mean you don't need all that much training. I mean, if you've ever seen a gorilla in a zoo or something, like
yeah,
bend over, man.
yeah,
Like just don't stand like a Japanese businessman
yeah,
turning around to get a train.
yes,
Um,
yeah,
but when I have another question about Kong. And this has to do with scale. So,
mm,
obviously King Kong in the American movies is much smaller, right?
mm-hmm,
Godzilla is himself the size of sort of like the Empire State Building or something.
yes,
King Kong would climb the Empire State Building and,
Yeah,
be a few, several stories tall, but that's about it.
yeah,
So King Kong would be scaling Godzilla, right?
yeah,
And obviously the different Godzillas, have been different heights and different versions. This is obviously a different version of Kong. That's fine. He's a Kong. He's got to be the size of Godzilla to make him fight, right?
yeah,
Okay, on the other hand, later on, he's holding a human woman and he's the
yeah.
size of King Kong in the American King Kong.
Yes,
And even when they sail him away from, I quite like this raft loaded with
with the
dynamite that
dynamite.
they
Yeah,
sail away with. I like the dynamite idea. Although, how big is Kong? That Yeah, clearly that dynamite is not, I mean, clearly that raft is not the size of Godzilla. I mean, it is not the size of an aircraft carrier. It is more the size of you know, a medium-sized boat.
well,
Um,
yeah. The issue. This is funny because you know, the one time I actually thought about it, you are right. I thought about this. You mentioned when he grabs the woman, and I'm like, oh, let's say she's what? Let's say 5'6", right? So she's average height for a woman. I'm like, so she's bigger than his hand. So how big is I was thinking so how big is King Kong compared to Godzilla? And it's sort of yeah, then you sort of see him next to a building and I'm like, oh no, she must be bigger than like, she's now 7'4". Like, she's all of a sudden grown a couple of feet to make this yeah, that bit didn't work. When the raft breaks and Kong goes in the sea, Kong is stood up in the sea. And again I'm like, how close to land are they that this makes sense? Is he sort of like paddling like furiously with his legs just to keep him above the water. Yeah, no, you are right that the scale of this sort of does start to. But this is the problem with miniatures, isn't it? When you've got miniatures, it's easy to do miniatures to a scale that you know. Because you're like, oh, this is a boat, this is a car, this is a helicopter, this is what the building looks like. And then you introduce Kong, and they're like, oh, Kong's got to be this big, and there's going to be, well, that's kind of massive. So we've got to try and adjust to get him in shot, and for this to work, and for that to work. So I don't envy them, and I don't think anyone notices in the sixties. But as you say, it becomes kind of blaringly obvious in parts of the
Yeah, and I
film.
mean it's a problem with, robot movies, they'll change
Hmm.
scale, especially when they have to interact with humans, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, I think that's one of the problems, with Kong is always shrinking in order to make him interact with humans. But that's true of, Optimus Prime, it's true of, lots of robot stories. Um,
Yeah.
I was confused about like I do like the dynamite on the raft,
Yes.
and this kind of humor of pressing the dynamite lever down. Um, but the point of the dynamite is, and I like that it's on the raft, it's not to kill him, right?
No.
Um, because the point is Kong can't swim.
Yes.
He will drown.
Yes.
Okay, then at the end of the movie, he wanders off into the ocean to
Yeah.
go back to his island.
I kind of I love that for two reasons because it's clearly a contradiction of what you've said, but also like as he's swimming away, it cuts to the Americans or the American version, and he sort of like just watches a small screen. He says, and weirdly enough, we wish him well on his very, very long journey home. And I'm like, oh no, so he is going to drown then? Like he's going to get exhausted and just drown in the ocean? Is that what we're letting happen? Okay, fair enough. Like we've drugged him before, we could have drugged him again and taken him back to Faroe Island, but no, we're just going to let him drown in the middle of the ocean. I felt really weird about the end.
Yeah, I feel the same way. But I did like the dynamite bit. I mean,
Yeah, no,
I
it's
do,
cool.
um, and it's like, yeah, what we really want is this juice.
Mm.
Um, but Kong is sort of like a bonus.
Yeah,
Um, but we're aware this is danger, so we're able to blow up his raft and drown
yeah,
him if we have to. It's all
yeah,
a little jury rigged, but
yeah,
it's kind of I do find that whole bit charming.
yeah. No, the whole
Like
stuff on
Kong
the
is an
boat.
afterthought. Like in the
Yeah,
American version, it's like, oh no, we're getting that Kong. We're gonna bring it back. That's gonna be a big draw.
yeah.
Um, Here it's like, yeah, we really want that berry juice.
Oh no, this is a
Give me your
pharmaceutical
Smurf
company.
berries.
Yeah, this is a pharmaceutical company looking to get something. I like the fact that there are characters. There's the sort of the head of the company, Mr. Taco. Um, I like the way that he's kind of like, he's the one that leans on the dynamite and does all that. But when he's sort of like he's brought down from the plane, and this felt almost like a it's stereotypical, but it works. He's obviously the head of the company, and they've all been on this adventure, and they're now heading home. But he comes down from the helicopter, gets winched down, and he's wearing like his pith helmet and his safari gear. He's brought his own rifle. He's all ready to sort of like, as if to say, like, to be sort of come off the ship at the end to be like, yes, I was part of this expedition as well. And I was like, that's a cool little, this guy's clearly a bit of a, you know, he's a bit of a I don't know, like you can tell he's that kind of boss. Like, he's going
Yeah.
to come and claim all the credit at the end of it and get off the ship and stuff. So I thought that was kind of cool as well.
Yeah, he's a fun character.
Yeah,
He's not really an important character, but
no,
he's fun to watch.
yeah, and I think there's a lot of that though, where they're sort of that fun is just, I think, is the operative of this, where they're like, they're clearly going like they know this is throwaway. I almost get the feel that they sort of, I don't, I'm going to check actually. I don't know what the budget of this film would be. I don't know if anyone would really have captured it for
Well, I
posterity,
know it.
but
I mean, it's
oh,
so the
okay,
budget for, yeah, 500,000.
yeah,
I mean, their licensing fee for King Kong was half of that.
wow.
Um, you know, which seems utterly ridiculous, but
But it kind of feels a little bit like they made this as a kind of throwaway, Toho. Because if you're looking at, Toho's gone like, yeah, we can do this. We can license King Kong. It'll make a bit of money. It'll be a bit of fun. And then, it doesn't feel like, Kong wins. I mean, let's be clear as well. Sorry, we've got to highlight this at the end. Spoilers. It kind of has, it's not, it's left ambiguous, but it's still slightly more definitive than others. I mean, they highlight repeatedly throughout the film that Godzilla is well, they refer to him as a lizard and then as an amphibian. Um, so then he goes in the water and he doesn't materialize. So they've told you like, oh, he can survive underwater, and then Kong appears and swims off. Um, but like it's kind of you're showing that Kong is the winner, like you said. King Kong is it's Kong versus King Kong versus Godzilla. Kong wins the fight at the end. I mean, he gets beaten down and then he comes back. He's the if you were going to get the full wrestling analogy, like he's the face and
yeah,
Godzilla's the heel in this. Like he Godzilla's
yeah,
still the baddie.
yeah. I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, King Kong is not exactly the hero, right? But I mean, um, I mean, he still sort of like menaces Tokyo. I mean, he's not,
Yeah.
uh, there's not, it's not really like there's the good guy or bad guy yet in these films, right? I mean, obviously
No.
Godzilla would go on to be the good guy defending Japan from various monsters, right?
Yeah.
That is not yet. Clearly Godzilla is the heel, as you say, and King Kong is sort of is more, the face in wrestling terms.
Hmm.
Um, but also King Kong is, he's winning. He's the headliner. I mean, he's the reason why this movie
Yeah.
exists. Um, Godzilla is just an easy matchup. I mean, he's there in wrestling terms, he's there to take the fall to
Yeah.
help establish the career of, King Kong, right?
Yeah.
This
I mean,
is King Kong returns. The Japanese have him. We got to have some matchup for him. Frankenstein was not available, and so we just went into our back catalog and got Godzilla.
well, exactly. But I think that we should highlight as well that you're 100% right that this is it's Godzilla that will go on to have the multi-film franchise from Toho and you know um, all different media types. But it isn't the end of it's Kong will have the next. I think it's. I'm trying to go. 67.
Years later,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. You're gonna get King Kong Escapes, um, which has is Toho. Yeah, it is. Yeah, again,
yeah, with Rankin
Ishihiro.
Bass.
Yeah, Ishihiro Honda is the director
Mhm.
again. Um, So it's Kong was sort of like a commodity that, like, you're right, this is kind of like them going, all right, we're going to build up Kong to be the sort of like the Titan. But I think you're right. I think this actually kind of elevates Godzilla
Hmm.
as more interesting and more fun. Um, but yeah, and also we should highlight that King Kong Escapes has Kong fighting a T-Rexy monster, but also a robot version of Kong. So sort of can't argue with
As
that.
he should.
As he should, yeah.
As he should. Well, I mean, I think I've always been really confused by this movie's existence because obviously, like, we think of it as the Godzilla franchise. I mean, this is installment
Mm,
three in the original Showa Godzilla films.
yeah.
Um, and well, so it's weird to think that there was the 7 year gap. It was not at all intuitive that Godzilla would come back, but also that really it's King Kong who brought Godzilla back.
Mm,
So, I mean, that's strange to think about. That's sort of this accident of history of they were able to license King Kong, and therefore there is a Godzilla franchise today.
yeah.
Um, but then the other thing that I've always found so weird is like, why are they licensing King Kong? First of all, like King Kong we're both fans of the King Kong movies, hence our
Mm,
willingness to, follow the season with a bunch of Kong films. But, King Kong is a 1933 film.
yeah. Yeah.
You know, the sequel, Son of Kong, is rushed into production and it comes out before the end of 33. This is almost 30 years later. Why? I mean, I know that, films took a lot longer to get abroad and all of this. Why does anyone care about King Kong in the 1960s, let alone the Japanese?
Well, I think
And
this.
you could make up your own version, as we've established. Like, there's been a fight over the rights, but you could make up your own, you know,
Oh, yeah, it didn't have to be Kong. I mean, how many sort
right?
of, after this, ironically, how many rip-offs of um, Godzilla are going to be?
And King
Gamma.
Kong,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
Gamera, and there's
Yeah.
and so on. Um, one thing I know about this period is the '60s, much like sort of like we've gone through this thing of like these nostalgia um reboots, right? The '60s was absolutely ripe with interwar nostalgia. During the 1960s, sort of like all the pulp characters sort of got rebooted. The pulp novels got redone. Loads of like this is where H.P. Lovecraft really took off because bunch of his novels and stories got republished. This is where Conan becomes a comic book because of like the Howard stories get republished, and a bunch of '30s films, including like the Universal monsters, all go back to the cinema. So
Yeah, 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 yeah.
so Kong is one of them. So in America, at least, Kong is re-released. I forget, I think it's like 1960 or something, but Kong is re-released, and it kind of gets a bit of a big deal because some of the Universal Monster movies get sort of re-released as well. And there's kind of this, yeah, there's kind of a nostalgia for those interwar years. The sort of the '30s, late '20s into the '30s kind of thing gets sort of visited and pulled into kind of like part of the counterculture. So it's odd, but it's not wholly surprising that there's kind of like a kitsch element to it for the '90s. So it's the way that we would look at the '60s. It's much further now, but the '90s probably looked at the '60s and was sort of like, well, actually, think about it. It's the same as like it's us going, oh, Austin Powers, a crazy character based on the '60s. That was 30 years ago. That's weird. It's a similar thing. I think we put the Avengers is not not the the Marvel's Avengers, but the British Avengers. John Steed and Emma Peel had a film done in the '90s. I think I'm trying to think. There's kind of this sort of in the '90s. There was a kind of bit of a '60s kind of Britpop, especially over here.
All the spy stuff,
All
Mission
the spy stuff,
Impossible,
yeah.
and
Britpop became a big thing of that. Sort of like Oasis and Blur versus the Beatles. Blah blah. Like it's like a 30-year cycle, isn't there? Of that sort of nostalgia, sort of pop culture thing. And you probably wouldn't think about it in this period because pop culture doesn't really grow until the 60s. But yeah, it was like the 30s stuff was kind of big in the 60s. So it was kind of ripe for it, I suppose.
Yeah, and that whole like that's fascinating. And that whole Kong versus Frankenstein thing was
Mm.
an American idea.
Yeah.
I mean, that was an idea to revive King Kong for American audiences in 1960, which lends credence to what you're talking about. It's
Can
sort of
we just say though that idea of a giant um,
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein does not go away. It had been around
Yeah.
since the 40s. For some reason, I don't know who it was, but like this whole thing of like a giant Frankenstein's monster had kicked around for. I don't think it ever actually got made, but I've read things and seen a couple of things where it was like, oh, they were going to do this as a sort of as a Titan kind of as a you know kaiju kind of movie. It was going to be this giant Frankenstein's monster.
So
Very
weird.
very bizarre, but it's the American monster, isn't it? Like um, in that
We
sense.
do everything bigger here,
Yeah, yeah,
uh the Statue of Liberty versus Frankenstein.
yeah. Could have happened.
Yeah, sure.
Um,
It's
I think it would have been.
Ghostbusters 2.5.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah. Um, so no, I do sort of see why this happened and how it sort of comes about, but I do find it kind of fascinating um that it's an odd choice. But like you say, it has its weird ramifications. It's still like it was a massive hit in Japan. It was a surprisingly big hit in the States, and it like I say it rejuvenated the careers of both Godzilla and I mean when's the next one? What's the next Godzilla film after this?
Oh, it's right after. And it's a maybe a let's see, it's Mothra versus Godzilla 64. So 2 years later,
Wow. Okay.
Mothra versus Godzilla, and that's and the next Godzilla is also 64, then 65, 66, 67, 68, 69. So, 71, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So the point is, this is the first of an unbroken line of Godzilla
Yeah.
movies going all through Terror of Mechagodzilla in 75. So basically from this movie on, there'll be an annual Godzilla movie um, through the Showa era. Yeah.
For the next 15 years, there will
Yeah.
be or thereabouts, next 12 years, there will be a Godzilla movie coming. And that's kind of impressive. I think that they obviously took it to that place and were able to do that. So um the irony is today we obviously complain, oh god, sequels. It's like, oh, there's always been the case. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I do find it. Yeah, it is fascinating how it's sort of, and obviously that um the one that obviously sort of not so much killed it off. What is it? Yeah, Monsters from an Unknown Planet. Um, 75. Um, is that the same as the Mecha Godzilla? Yeah, Godzilla versus. Oh no, it's Mecha Godzilla is 74. So yeah, and
And
then
yeah,
there's
well, Terror of Mechagodzilla is
yes.
I think the last show.
So it is
Yeah.
kind of interesting how that kind of
Monsters from an Unknown Planet is the
yeah.
UK title. That's why
Ah,
I
you
didn't
go.
know it. Yeah. Um,
Yeah. So we've got it,
Monsters from an
it
Unknown
becomes a
Planet.
bit. It's weird how like this thing, as you say, because of an American intervention. It sounds weird to say this, but like the introduction of Kong
Mhm.
really goes to establish an iconic Japanese um, figure in Godzilla. If this hadn't have happened, I do wonder if sort of like that first Godzilla film would be a sort of a milestone. They go, oh yeah, that's that film from 1954, monster movie from 54, but it'd just be that monster movie from 54, and
Yeah,
then
with its lesser sequel.
yeah, and then go, oh
Yeah.
yeah, Raids Again was rubbish, and then that'd be it.
Right.
Um, And so, yeah, it's interesting to see sort of how this kind of like, not only does it rejuvenate it, it completely changes the direction. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
monster fighting, but fun monster fighting is the way to go.
Yeah, that's very well said. And also sort of like this vague sci-fi setting that we don't need to be
Mm,
very particular about, and we don't need to really do any world building. We'll just reference the Japanese have atomic bombs now, and there's a space station, and why not? And that comes up in some of the later Godzilla movies. The other thing that I think is interesting here is that, like about that Godzilla formula, is that obviously, like, Godzilla is just Godzilla attacks, right?
Yeah,
Godzilla raids again. He now has an opponent, but it's all very lackluster, and here it's in color, and King Kong is really a King Kong movie, and they bring Godzilla back from the back catalog to give him someone to fight, basically. And now we're just in fun monster fights, right? That done
yeah,
like a wrestling performance. Well, coming up with a sequel to this, they looked at their back catalog and say, "Well, we did that Mothra movie.
Oh yeah, because Mothra obviously came up before this as well. Yeah,
Yeah. So what's going on is, I mean, it's fascinating, right? Because like they're building this shared universe, we
yeah,
now call it, right? But it's all because of this matchup with Kong, of like, well, we need someone for Kong to fight. Let's go to the back catalog and just pull out this Godzilla character no one really cares about. Okay, well now we don't we need someone for Godzilla to fight in the next one. Let's go to the back catalog. And they kept doing this,
yeah.
you know, and that really built the franchise.
I
It
think
sort
that's
of
the
sets
thing.
the formula,
It
yeah,
does. It
for
sets the formula for the rest of the show or era. What's interesting is that I'm just sort of looking at some of these as you sort of mentioned them. I'm just checking in. The thing that's interesting about this though is there's still this underlying. Whenever he returns, like Godzilla will sort of return to a sort of a not so much as serious, but maybe a darker tone. So you've got like 54, the one from 85, the Return of Godzilla, 84. So literally like 30 years
Mhm.
later, returns much more to the tone of the first one.
Right.
But
Well,
then instantly, oh, go on.
yeah. Well, it ignores. It's a sequel to the first one that ignores all the others.
Yes,
Right.
yeah, and then like instantly, like in '89, they're like back to fighting. Now we're gonna have
Yeah.
Godzilla versus Biolante, and then it goes back. They're like, oh, we're back. That one in 85, 84 did pretty well. Now we're gonna go back to the way it was, and
Yeah,
you know,
it keeps switching between sort of wanting to go back to the seriousness
yeah,
of the first movie versus wanting to go back to the campy fight stuff.
yes. That's it. And you sort of, but every now and then they'll do it. I mean, recently we had, I don't know if you've ever seen like Shin Godzilla, um, which I actually
I
really
haven't, but
enjoy.
I want to. Oh,
Yeah, maybe we'll do a Godzilla, like a solo Godzilla
yeah.
solo retrospective. And then obviously you got the American versions of 98 and then 2014, and then more recently the excellent
Hmm.
Godzilla -1, which
Yeah, which
again
is also return
returns.
to seriousness, right?
Yeah,
Meanwhile, it's funny, the Americans,
yeah,
who are known for their pretentious seriousness and everything, including like even the Matthew Broderick Godzilla, right?
yeah,
Tries to be a serious Godzilla. Um, but where the Americans are busy doing the full-on monster fighting in a universe that makes no sense whatsoever with the legendary movies,
yeah.
and it's the Japanese that are doing the
More serious
serious
one. Well, to
ones.
be fair, that first Godzilla, the Gareth Edwards one from 2014, kind of hears
Yeah.
closer to the sort of more serious. I mean, it's much more about the ramifications of having this monster
Hmm.
there, and yes, he fights the Muto monsters, but you're right. The sequel to that is just called Godzilla King of Monsters. They're not going to do one. They're like, "Ah, fuck it, all of them, everybody in. This is a Royal Rumble."
Yeah.
Yeah, they do not mess around, and then they go straight in after that. Um, so yeah, it's an
It's
oddity.
very
Like
bizarre.
it is, isn't it? Like it's like the tone can shift. I don't think there's any other. I don't know. I don't know. This kind of can you get away with this shift in tone of any other character in pop culture? There's very few that you could go. Oh, from week to or movie to movie, we're going to have a slot. We're going to go all in seriousness, and this is a sort of a meditation on sort of like a cataclysmic event, or it's him versus a sludge monster, and it's going to be a big battle.
I was thinking about that question, and you know what occurred to me is the answer is James Bond.
Yes, it's true.
Because and sometimes you'll have like a serious Bond right next to,
Yeah.
a silly Bond, in the very next movie.
Well, Pierce Bro. I mean, yeah, you get like Connery sort of goes a little the way, but you obviously get the more ones. But the Brosnan series is exactly that, isn't it? It's like, oh, we've got Goldeneye. We're going back to it's gonna be a sci-fi sort of
Fun, yeah.
sci-fi sort of like fun, but sci-fi thriller. And by the end of that, they're like, he's jet skiing across ice on an invisible car. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, and I mean this that tonal. I mean, even in the Connery years, right? I mean, you have
yeah,
like From Russia with Love, which is like we're doing a serious espionage story, and then it's
mm,
like we're gonna follow that with Goldfinger,
yeah,
just like the funnest, silliest thing you've ever seen.
yeah,
Um, and obviously, I mean, the Roger Moore ones oscillate in terms of not just quality but seriousness,
yeah,
too. Um, yeah, so I mean, but we look back on these franchises and people always prefer one tone or the other, right? And
yes,
usually, like with Bond, they look down on some of the silly stuff, except for when it really works, like Goldfinger or You Only Live Twice.
hmm
But with Godzilla, I don't know. I've always felt weird about the Godzilla movies. I sort of I like the first one. It's obviously I like the sort of like characters. I love Mothra. I sort of like the iconography, but
yeah,
I like the file cards, kind of like
yeah.
the
Top
learning the
trumps,
characters.
like
Yeah,
yeah, like a
but
Pokemon deck of monsters.
yeah, exactly. I think that's a cool idea, but
Mm.
I've never really enjoyed the movies.
I'm the same. No,
Yeah.
100%. I'm exactly the place. Like the amount of times I've tried to watch the sillier Godzilla films, and I really struggle. Like I've watched the more serious ones, like the 54 one and beyond that, kind of fine with that. Even like the
Hmm.
American 1998 one, I kind of
Hmm.
like. But when it gets into the sort of the battle ones, it loses me. And maybe I should try more. But I've watched several from the Showa era, and I am like, I I can't do this. Like I'll watch it, and I'm like, I end up really doing other. End up sort of like I'm on my laptop or I'm really sort of on my phone. Like they don't hold my attention because they are kids films. I mean, let's be clear, they are kids films. They are silly. Um, yeah, I don't know. I love the idea, as you say. Like um, it's one of those things where I see the posters for some of these things. There's one from I think the 90s, um, which is like King Kong Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, and the poster is Ace.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, that's brilliant. Oh, I love that. And then but then you look at it and I've watched the film. There you go, 91, the one from 1991. The poster for it is Ace.
Hmm.
All right, it's
Yeah,
Godzilla
it looks like
wrapped
a
up
it
in
looks like a shoot 'em up video game cover from the
a
era or something. Like, yeah, it looks
exactly, yeah,
great.
it's phenomenal, right? You got like a submarine firing missiles at them, and Ghidorah's doing all this stuff. It's fantastic. That does not represent the film that I watched because you watch the film and I'm like, oh, this film's kind of like silly. It's got time travel in it. Um, it ends up like it's not bad, but like I don't know, it just they never match up to what I have in my head as going like, oh, this is what this film could be. And then you're watching it is a guy in a rubber suit, and you're like, oh yeah, no, it's still a guy in a rubber suit. Um,
Yeah, that's why like when we think about some of these other franchises, like we could do a block of RoboCop, we could do a block of Alien.
mm,
I think we should do at some point just like the Shin Godzilla, maybe Godzilla 84,
yeah, yeah,
Matthew Broderick,
the solo
minus one.
outings, the solo outings
Yeah,
of Godzilla. Yeah,
the sort of self-contained
yeah,
ones. I think we could do those four, no problem, and be interested in them, and that's about enough.
yeah, yeah.
But if imagine going through the Showa era stuff and just rabbit.
No,
I mean, I can't do more than one at a time.
no,
You and I can force ourselves to watch one movie
yeah,
and talk about it. We have watched some astounding movies and we have watched some real stinkers, we could force ourselves to get through one movie and talk about it with my bro, right?
Yeah,
But
I couldn't do
imagine
no.
plotting through six or something. I mean, I would be.
It's the kind of thing where because they become quite repetitive. Because the thing is, we can look at this and we've talked about like oh, it's interesting about how the history came together, the impact it's had. By the third one, it'd just be yeah, it's the same thing again. Like there's no beyond the sort of like oh, that was cool to see. There is nothing to them. They are very shallow films. Um, in that sense. They don't, really add anything to sort of, there's no social commentary. There's no real advances in sort of special effects. There's nothing really to them. They're just kind of, they are those Showa films are the truest form of like 60s popcorn films, aren't they, really?
Well, and we
Um,
criticize movies today for being too much like video games and
yeah,
this kind of I mean that's what these are. I mean these are, these are fighting games basically. And all the rest is kind of window dressing, right? I
yeah,
mean,
yes.
if you get a tribe, that has a cool dance, that's cool. That's fine. You get, some women acting weird and communicating with Mothra, that's cool. That's about all you're going to get, and then you're going to get you know, a fighting video game. And
I would say you said before about there's a book to write on like the American censorship influence on Japanese cinema and stuff. I'd love to go further though, because this idea of there's this cutesy kind of presentation of Japanese pop culture today. You have all sort of different bits and pieces. But one of the things I'm always fascinated by is, and more or less is sort of like the anime and manga sort of style of things. But I do wonder, like these fighting films, as you sort of say, like how much did they influence things like Pokemon, Digimon, Dragon Ball Z, all those kinds of those Japanese kind of stories that are told that are very much sort of focused around the epic battle. I'll be interested. I'll be curious to see. I'd be interested to see. There must be a sort of a lineage to follow.
yeah, I like what you're saying there, and the sort of collect them all, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's funny that the Godzilla movies, like we talk about world building, right?
Hmm.
There's no world building in these movies, right? I mean, there's now a space station
Yeah.
in some of these movies that are in theory set in the same universe. There's, space flight going on, and humans are going to other planets and stuff. I mean, there's no coherent world. I mean, even
No.
even in like the Japanese Transformers continuations of G1, there's no coherent world, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like there's energy balls within human souls, and you're like, how does and then it's like, let's raise Atlantis, and you're like, how did Optimus Prime not notice that for the 10 years he was on Earth? I mean, but there's no attempt to really make a coherent world. But at
Mm.
the same time, there's a lot of world building in the sense that, in the way, in the cheap sense, that, it's often really what people really mean, which is just adding details. Um,
Yes. Somewhat
and
cool.
and
This would be cool
yeah,
if.
and you and I love the like the file. Like, I mean, I would
Mm.
seriously think about having just like trading cards of all the Godzilla monsters.
Oh, yeah. I'm
Like a
sure they
really well
exist.
rendered, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, a set of cards that might be cool to have. I mean, I have enough possessions. I don't really need this, but
But
you know, I
it's a
mean,
cool
that
idea.
sounds cool, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I have seen like a local artist render all of the Godzilla monsters from the Showa era on in a Japanese restaurant, on the walls. Looks amazing. So cool. It makes me want to watch those movies and like those movies. And I hate those movies. I can't, I just don't hate them. I just, the reality of them is not that entertaining. It's.
No, yeah, it's kind of works. This is the thing. I mean, Pokemon and those sort of things. They are a game, aren't they? They are. Um, that's kind of the idea. It's a card. It's that exact game as you're sort of saying. Um, and then they obviously build a story around it. But the whole thing around like Pokemon being an anime and focus at kids. It's kind of simple because it focuses on the game, where it's like, as you say, collect them all. Here's a cool Pokemon. You can evolve it. It does this thing. You've got to win these battles, and you can go on some little side adventures. And that's kind of like you go. That's where Kong, sort of, Kong. That's where Godzilla kind of went with the Showa era, where you're like, but you can't collect them; they're just there, and it literally ends with like, I think there's one called sort of
Destroy all
Destroy All
monsters.
Monsters.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you're like,
yeah,
oh, okay, cool. Then that's clearly the sort of the point, the where they're going to. So, um, yeah, it makes sense that there must be a lineage in that, and somehow.
yeah,
Um,
for sure.
I am going to say just quickly, I have sort of looked just what's from this. So there isn't like a Godzilla top trumps or collection. There's a couple of Godzilla games, which is very similar
Mm.
to what we're sort of saying. But there was one that's just called the Horror Top Trumps, and there is a Godzilla one. Um, and it's out of 100. So,
Hmm.
it has categories. It's got physical strength, fear factor, killing power, horror rating are the four things that each of these characters get. Okay. And Godzilla gets physical strength, 98, fear factor, 88, killing power, 95, and horror rating, 77.
That
Um,
seems about right.
yeah. And so there's some other things on there. I'm just looking at some others. So they did some other Dracula's in there. Um, yeah, the Mad Magician, the Mad Axeman. So yeah, and it's kind of weird, but someone else thought the same too. Anyway, right. I think we've talked enough about King Kong versus Godzilla. But
It's cool to see this though. I mean, this is a movie
yeah,
that I've known existed and been curious about forever and never bothered to sit down and watch. So,
I'm glad you got to watch it. It is good fun. I mean, for all the sort of ribbing that we give it, um, I definitely think it's worth a watch. I mean, this is a kind of film you can sit back with, with either as adults, sit that with friends, and you can have a laugh at it. But like, it's safe for the kids. Pop it on.
mhm.
It's silly, good fun. You can sort of laugh at it. Um, so yes. Anyway, any final thoughts then on King Kong versus Godzilla?
No, I mean, I still am. I still always want to like the Godzilla movies more than I actually do. I
Yeah.
mean, this is a silly movie, but it's not bad. It's not,
Mm,
it's not painful. I mean, the that Godzilla Raids Again was pretty painful to get through.
yes.
Uh, that was actually bad.
Yeah.
This is sort of inoffensive pablum,
Yeah.
with a little bit of charm, some stuff that doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's kind of hokey and fun to watch.
Yeah. If anything, I'd actually recommend watching if you're into the charm and into the sort of like the how weird and sort of silly this is, I'd actually recommend watching the American version because the sort of like the non sequiturs to the UN reporter at the interviews, they just
Hmm.
add sort of like a layer of what the fuck is going on. Um, and I kind of appreciate that. So, anyway, we are continuing with our season six. This is we're to our third sort of episode, but now the tone may change somewhat. Um, so yeah, the next episode is the year of the Sex Olympics, which being a very prudish British podcaster, I may struggle with this one. So we shall see how it goes.
Well,
Um,
this wasn't this broadcast on the BBC?
oh, I'm sure it
Uh,
was. Yeah,
yeah. So I mean, in the
there's
in back
crazy
in the day. So,
Those crazy BBCs. Disgusting. Filth, that's what it is.
and this is Nigel Keel, right?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
We're doing a Nigel Neal uh doubler because yes, it was the year of the Sex Olympics and then the Stone Tape. I'm gonna double check
Yeah.
those. So yes, we sort of round that
Looking
out.
forward to it.
But yeah. So anyway, for those that are listening, on to us on the Patreon and sort of get that sort of exclusive upfront. Thank you very much for supporting. I hope you're enjoying it. And let us know again. What are your thoughts on Godzilla and the Godzilla series or Kong series? Because we will be doing more Kong as we get to it. Have you enjoyed the Showa era? Have we sort of really ruffled your feathers with this one, saying that they're a bit daft? But what's your favourite Godzilla film? Let us know. I'm fascinated. And to those people that are watching it, listen to this later on the main feed. Same again. Let us know what are your favourite Godzilla films. But anyway, for now, Julian, thank you very much for watching along on this one and the discussion.
Yeah,
Good fun.
thanks for like giving me the opportunity, and
Nice.
onward and upward.
Yeah. And for those listening, thank you very much, and we shall see you on the next episode.
There's something very important I forgot to tell you.
What?
Don't cross the streams.